Hi, this is Crystal Blue, and I'm here to talk about the last part of the position card number 3, Dance Celebration. And I have multiple parts or sections to this reading or to this part of the reading, I should say. It gets, it is a complex period of time that we're talking about here, and that's why I decided to start with this rather old book about the age of Aquarius, because we can see that many people are watching now, watching the skies, watching the stars, watching what has been transpiring since the great shift or the great conjunction of December 2020 at the winter 2020 winter solstice. So, and then initially I was planning on starting with talking about some of the planets and transits and energies that are being discussed now, but I'm sticking mainly with just what I've already put in the description boxes, not just for this Earth is Magical reading number 4, but also trying to merge in some of my other earlier readings leading up to this point, up to the spring equinox, and especially involving the December 2020 mid-month message that I posted, that I'll get into probably as a side discussion on Patreon, because it does involve the Celtic cross that I was guided to pull or to do in December 2020 at the winter solstice. And then I was also guided, ironically, to pull more cards after I did the reading for card number 2, Autumnal Equinox Release. So Spirit is trying to help us release a lot of this past angst, even as, the shit starters start more war over in Ukraine. But as I said in my last post, in relation to this dance card position number 3, I do believe that it's going to be ended very soon, because people are wise to the manipulations that comprise war in quote-unquote modern time. So I'm not going to get into those details. When you learn more about me, you'll learn what I learned on my journey as a former military spouse who was married to a former U.S. military member during 9/11, but also many years prior to when the Twin Towers were hit with directed energy, and God knows what else happened on 9/11. So that's why I've decided to post some relevant 9/11 information on my Patreon site, so you can go there, and because that is essentially what I was fighting in courts of law, and I didn't know the layers of it involving family law, nor did I know the liars that I was around. So I speak from direct experience. But I do want to talk about the reasons why Spirit had me go through what I went through, but in relation to this more metaphysical approach, because for me it's more enjoyable to talk about than traversing that difficulty, which Spirit did guide me through, along with Archangel Michael and the other angels. So that's why I'll be getting into the Angels of Atlantis deck as soon as I talk about this Aquarian shift, this Age of Aquarius shift, which I had mentioned in, like I said, in a previous part of this overall Earth is Magical reading number 4. Because I had gone to a page in here like the library fairy shows me, and I went right to the part where it was talking about how past assessments that the age of Aquarius had already started are incorrect because, or not as accurate, because the tightness or the closeness of specific planets did not transpire. I'll see if I can find this real quick. If not, you can find a copy of this book. My son and I found it when we were forced to live like veterans on the streets post 9/11. And ironically, we didn't see many of those veterans living out on the streets trying to cope with their physical and mental health issues, but we surely met a number of Vietnam veterans and even a World War II veteran who was in his 90s living in a van on the streets. So war is definitely a racket, a RICO racket, racketeering influenced corrupt organization, which I call black operations. So if you get the book Behold a Pale Horse, like I was guided to when I was fighting these shysters in California, in the water industry, and thereafter when I could no longer work in my profession, you'll see how Spirit was guiding me to show me just who was behind this iron curtain, but also this water manipulation and drought manipulation, because water is being used as a weapon. And many agencies, including the government agencies I was working in for, quote unquote, the state, became militarized, became weaponized. And I had already left. I thought I'd left all that behind when I decided to disconnect from that relationship by 2010 for the last time. So what I'm saying is it has many tentacles and many heads, so to speak, and we're seeing that monster flare up yet again over in Ukraine, and it's not ironic that it's happening over in the IT, or I call it hashtag IT sector of Ukraine, where unfortunately a mother was killed. So, it's sad, but we are working, a lot of us light workers are working to shine the light on this evil and call it out for what it is and what it is not. And it is not of goodness, and it's not of light, and it's not God, but those with these types of weapons doing these things surely believe that they're God, and they believe they're God because they have these weapons, and because they're deciding who lives and dies on this planet. So, I've worked tirelessly to try to get some remedy inside and outside of courtrooms, but we can see that the U.S. justice system is failing, as are many other systems, all while the Earth system is being manipulated by NASA and other corporations, which Nostradamus could see over 500 years ago. And I'll try to post the book that I was also guided to about this, exactly when I was guided to read multiple books about Hitler, as well as Behold a Pale Horse, from my my greenhouse, a house that I had painted green, when I had to purchase it, um, and separate from that relationship the first time around 9/11. So, um, you know, the war machine just wants spoils of war, and they don't care who they trample. But the war machine is a conglomeration of many entities, and it is extreme. And so when you see, for instance, like the Islamic State, well, the Islamic State is an extremist group, just as is other extremist um, efforts to control or dominate tracts of land, natural resources, and even populations. So it's this issue of state and church that I was having to confront as one single person inside courtrooms and inside family law courtrooms, which I had success doing until 2011. So you can see that things were changing once protracted war from the early 90s wound down in the Middle East, in Iraq, the cradle of civilization. And then it's as if I could see like a turret gun, like Spirit was showing me a turret gun as a visual. And I was at home working as a scientist, but I was having certain visions or premonitions or even messages downloaded to me of what books to read, to pay attention to my surroundings, etc. And that's what I was guided to do. And I learned to follow the higher power as I distance myself from that evil that has a belief system that is energetically driven, but it's a dark energy. Okay, so it doesn't matter what the name is or what the likeness is that they're copying, including goddess energy and goddess names like Isis. Um, what matters is the energy, and other astrologers. That's why they've come online more, in my estimation, along with a lot of us people who are channelers and light workers. It's almost as if it became like a craze, but a good thing, because when I started learning tarot, and I'd already been guided to use Archangel Michael oracle cards um, by 2012, and I won't get into the reason why right now, but it was a tragic thing that the angels were helping me. But it's like this flux of energy came online on the internet to offset this matrix, this dark ops matrix. And as I said in one of my first readings that I posted, one of my first tarot oracle readings on YouTube, the clarion call of transformation, that I didn't even realize that I was even in what they call the matrix, but I was. And most of us are, because of, as I've said, conditioning and conditions precedent, as well as conditional love, that we've been guided to operate from. And that's not operating from the heart, by the way, because we can see that there's a lot of mental illness because of a lot of the mental cruelty that has transpired, which was directed at me more and more as well when I disconnected from the matrix, because I was realizing whatever the hell it was called, or whatever it was, and I call it hashtag IT because there are many layers. I didn't want to be a part of it. And that's when I learned, the more I distanced myself, the more they came after me. and they use their weapons against me. So, but they haven't prospered. I mean, they may have taken possessions of mine, but they didn't get my soul, and that was the goal. Okay, that was the goal, and so that's what Spirit has me here doing messages. So it's a 15-minute intro that kind of gives you a little bit of idea why I keep doing this, and why Spirit has me talking about what's happening on Earth and anchoring in more love on the planet, and and teaching people to be more thinking more from the heart. So I have a cosmic heart message that I've posted on YouTube and on Patreon, and I've linked it in multiple other readings, including ones about the twin flame soulmate journey. Because as it stands, I was married to a soulmate, but I was going through this journey of enlightenment as well, and unfortunately, it's not an easy one. And that's what we're here to do on the planet, is to learn about evil and learn about God, and make the choice. Essentially, what is it going to be? Are you going to follow the light, or are you going to continue down the path of darkness, where a lot of these ne'er-do-wells are seeking to take over, and take over to the extreme, which is terrorism? And so that's why 9/11 fits into this particular message, as well as others, including the twin flame reading that I just reposted. Okay, because you'll see, as I was figuring out, there was something going on in my neck of the woods, and I was also guided to read the book, The Alphabet versus Goddess, around 2005 or so, when I was in law school. But you can see that the goddess energy is being manipulated even in the justice system and on the globalist stage, in the form of high priestesses. But those high priestesses are working for the dark side. And that's part of my journey too, is I disconnected from that once I realized, at a minimum, that it was like energy that will make the hair stand on your back and then some, as I've said. I didn't know what quote unquote IT was, but I knew that I didn't want to be around it. And then Spirit has been guiding me to learn more about it as I chose to distance myself from it. So that's where I'm at these days too, is trying to help other people realize what their tax dollars in the United States has been supporting in the billions and trillions, and even at the state level in the millions, because I, excuse me, I was tripping over or stumbling upon a lot of fraud, and I was stumbling upon it because there were the bad actors that I was around inside the state government, in the water industry. So water did come out as one of the Atlantis cards for the first part of this reading. It's part one for card number 3. I think it was part number 1. It might be the intro for card number 3. So you can watch the introduction for card number 3, Dance Celebration, and also part 1, and you'll see what I'm talking about, because it gets back to this whole, manipulation of history and worship, and manipulation of historical information and science, and even science data, and even programs that I once worked on when I was a young mother working at NASA in the 1990s. So Spirit was guiding me through all this, knowing that I needed to see these things and witness what I witnessed, so that one day I would be able to speak about this. And God knew my heart. So I just had to figure out where I wanted to be, and on that dark side is not where I really wanted to be, but for the deception. So there's a lot of deception that many people have realized they've been a part of unknowingly. There's a lot of lies and manipulation that have transpired within family units to break up family unity, I call it like a covalent bond between parents and children. I've talked about that at the border in Mexico, and also through history, when the Jewish people were separated into the concentration camps and burned and incinerated. Um, you know, the story hasn't changed. The ne'er-do-wells, the evil on our planet, is still functioning in a similar way. Only now they're targeting animals and the planet itself. So this shows you that there is a lack of control and delusion along with it to the extreme, because they think they're God, but they're not, and they're destroying God's creation. So I want to get back to this Age of Aquarius information, because this is part of the Great Shift, and this is what I was writing about in my book before it got blocked, because I was figuring it out even when I was being a targeted scientist. But it says here in this book, which is, I'll tell you who it's written by because I didn't see an ISBN number. Let's see if I can find. I think I went through this before and can. It's like a page is missing. Maybe it's here. Oh, here it is. By Maria Elise Crumier and illustrated by André Dorencio. So they're French. The Age of Aquarius. I'll show you so you can see. My maiden name is spelled 3 different ways because of what I speak about that I went through just over state lines. But my ancestors were involved, they suffered through the crusades of past problematic domination. I'll just say that. So it's been part of my journey to not only experience that on a certain level or certain levels, but also try to troubleshoot it and reverse engineer it, if you will. My throat's kind of tightening up, so, throat chakra. The dark side doesn't want the light to succeed, of course, and they don't want light workers like myself to survive. So this was copyrighted by Western Publishing Company out of New York in 1970. Here is the catalog card number 74-124079. And this is what I want to read about the Great Conjunction, because this is exactly where I think we are right now. And I think they are correct here. I think they did say where the closeness of the planets at the point that this was written was not close enough to produce a great shift, or the movement, the energetic movement, if you will, toward the new age of Aquarius out of the age of Pisces. But in my estimation and many astrologers, that's exactly what transpired in December of 2020. So I'm not even an astrologer, and I knew intrinsically, and I also knew to write about it. I'll try to show you the book that I had set out before. It's called The Great Shift. I didn't even have to read that book, and I knew. I just knew that it was relevant to what I was writing in my book, Pass Forward. And my son said, "Hey, Mom, you should put that in your subtitle." So I did. And you'll see that my book is titled pass forward the shared life and insights of an adventurous, patriotic, environmental scientist, loving and fighting to survive during the Great Shift. So this is still happening because their weapons are still being formed against me in different ways, and their tactics and their manipulations to try to trip me up. But that's Satan, right? So not only have I had to deal with this in 3D and their maniacal behavior, I'm also working for God. So who are they working for? You know, I'm not out trying to annihilate people and wreck their careers and steal their houses and, rape, rob, pillage in the world. So, who are the evil ones? Who are the crazy ones? As I've said. But crazy doesn't think it's crazy, okay? And I'm not poking at being crazy. What I'm poking at is that the game playing and the game players are going to meet up with their karma because they're delusional about what it is that they're serving. So here it says a grand conjunction. On Sunday, February 4th, 1962, in the Western world, there was a new moon. And new moons, I must say, are those new moons and full moons are those that I've been guided intrinsically to track. It was not in my nature to track them, but over time I've been guided to track them, okay? And that's part of my, see if I can pull this out without dropping everything. That's why Snoopy's been around. That's why I pulled Snoopy out several times, because this is also what I've been tracking, is this, this great conjunction or grand conjunction and great shift, okay? So I'm going to leave Snoopy right there. You can see Woodstock with him too, right? But it says, in February 1962, there was a new moon, a very important new moon in the sign of Aquarius, and we just came through the new moon in Aquarius in February of 2022. So, what was that, 60 years ago? Yeah, because I'm 56 and I was born in 65. So this says a grand conjunction in Aquarius. Many astrologers endorse the idea that this grand conjunction in Aquarius heralded the arrival of the Aquarian age, and the rumors spread. But there were only two history makers in this alignment, Saturn and Jupiter. A conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter can presage a more forward-looking government, certainly an improved state. And I just got done talking about government and state and church, right, and the extremism. But they were not close enough to cooperate with each other. And just to let you know, cooperation is one of the cards, along with water, that came out in, I believe it was part 1 of this card 3. So this is what I'm getting at. When I pulled this card, I kind of knew what Spirit was guiding me toward talking about, right? But I talked about this ascension, to the light and helping people find their path and take the steps toward their own evolution, right? But this, I also mentioned, I think for card 2 and maybe even card 1, or both of them. I'm not sure which one it was that I talked about this, but I think it was card 2, the release, autumnal equinox release card. That in traditional tarot, the Hierophant is has to do with the body corporate, with government, with officials, with corporations, corporal treatment, and corporal officers, etc. Right? So that's like the state or the city-state of, like the Vatican, etc. There are several city-states, not just the Vatican. And I think one is in London, and the other one I believe is Washington, D.C., and there might be another one. I can't think of it right now because I don't want to get off track. But what I'm saying is, you know, in the Light Seer Tarot deck that I talked about in one of the earlier parts, shows the Hierophant card number 5, the major arcana, as being more like a stairway to heaven. So that's what we're working on our planet, and that's what this great shift is about. So getting back to this grand conjunction in Aquarius, right? Back in the 60s, in 62, when I was born, there was a lot of strife. President Kennedy was shot in the head. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated as well. People that were trying to make a difference at high levels were being taken out. And both federal, government, the executive branch, as well as in religion, involving religion. Um, so here, this is saying, it's reminding us that Saturn and Jupiter were not close enough to cooperate with each other back in 62, and that's probably why things weren't so successful. And I'm not saying that that justifies anybody dying. What I'm saying is that on an astrological level, there were some complications. It sounds like energetic um, misalignments, or not being close enough. I don't have the astrological terminology, but anyhow, Saturn was very close in conjunction with Mars, the planet of strife, and that's the war energy, the war mensurae that I talk about. Astrologically, this could be read to mean war with government programs, and that's what it says right there. And that's pretty much what was happening at very high levels, but also involving police officers. And unfortunately, this habit or this situation, I would be dumbfounded, but this is what would transpire in my life 40 plus years later. And I would have to recall a dream that I had as a small child around this time to help me survive through it. So this is the stuff that I was writing about in my book. But here it says, Saturn was very close in conjunction with Mars, planet of strife, and astrologically this could be read to mean, as I said, war with government programs. Mercury and Venus were in the exact same degree. This could be manifest as sweet talk. Also, many promises as Jupiter joined in the same degree. But the influence of these three, Venus, the planet of peace and love, Mercury, the intellect, and Jupiter, optimism, was obscured by that of sly, subtle Neptune, the ruler of the Piscean age, which also Neptune in tarot is represented by the illusion card, number 18, the moon. Okay, so, and Neptune was located in the dominant position at the top of the chart in the sign of Scorpio, which is ruled by Pluto, the planet Pluto. Now, if you notice, I just today happened to type in these exact planets in correlation to what's happening right now and the new moons that are at 12 degrees. So this is like a year and 3 months out from the grand conjunction of December 2020, but continue to listen. So if Scorpio and Pluto were involved, as well as Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter at the time, well, now we have Aquarius factoring in much more strongly than Neptune, and we just came through both an Aquarian and a Neptune new moon, and we're approaching the new moon in Aries, which is Mars energy, which is war energy. So it's going to be really interesting to see how long this situation in Ukraine continues. But know this, during the grand conjunction of the volatile 1960s, 1962 specifically, Uranus was in the 7th house, which is a ruler of relationships and of other countries. In this position, Uranus was in opposition to 3 beneficial or benefic planets: Venus, peace; Mercury, agreements; and Jupiter, luck. So the position of Uranus actually denied the Aquarian age of peace had come, right? Or it doesn't really say peace here, but that's what the flavor back in the 70s was being served up, was, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius and we're going to have peace. I remember this as a young child, as I watched, war scenarios on TV too. But back then, the television reporters did not lie to support the war machine, to at least to the level that they are, fake news is today. So Neptune was still ruling then in the 60s, which is perpetuating the illusion, right? And it afflicted all of the 7 planets that were gathered in this grand conjunction that I just spoke about, right? Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, Neptune, Scorpio, and Uranus. Okay. So see what's happening now in comparison. But I wanted to talk about this real quick because I'm not going to get into the details of the astrology. That's for the astrologers who are doing a really good job, by the way. I keep up with it whenever I can. But Serious Joy, Sensei Christopher has really got a neat way of teaching it that's not threatening. So does Susan Miller of astrologyzone.com, who I've followed for years. Pam Gregory talks about a lot of these other planetary influences in the Kuiper Belt and asteroids, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the heavens. But this is where the order is coming, and we can see that man is disordered. So because man thinks he's God, because he separated himself from his creator. And that's, the mental illness that I'm talking about. It's the mental imbalance between the mind, heart, and the soul, which is the compass. And once you're off, you're going to be wandering in, quote unquote, the desert for a long time, and even probably from one lifetime to the next until you get it right. That's part of this spiritual journey that our souls are on to grow and learn, right? So certainly astrologers who were educated in cyclic law, or the precession of the equinoxes, realized that that we had not yet come to the age of Aquarius back in the 60s. The precession of the equinoxes is the apparent backward motion of the equinoxes on the ecliptic, as if they advance to meet the sun on its annual return. Okay, and so we just passed through the fall equinox, the winter solstice, and now we're into the spring equinox. And then we'll have the summer solstice. So the energy messages that I've been receiving are saying that things are going to continue to unfold into the summer, the summer solstice period. And one of my past Earth is Magical readings shows the summer solstice, the summer solstice card. And I was also seeing it in a pre-shuffle when I started preparing for this Earth is Magical reading number 4. So we'll see what happens on the earth plane and in the skies above. But here it says to get into Aquarius, the precession of the equinoxes must fall back the one sign of Pisces. And this is according to cyclic law, which is what, Spirit had me show this card at the end of the last part of this card 3 reading, this part of the card 3 discussion. Okay, so we know that there is order in the cosmos, but there's a lot of disorders and dis-ease transpiring on Earth at this time, and it's because of what has been manipulated, including historical information, history, religion, science, which I can attest to firsthand, and even manipulation of what it means to have, a family and raise a healthy family and live in peace and quiet enjoyment. So here it says, this is talking about peace, no peace, false promises, and indecisiveness. And that's pretty much what we're still dealing with. And that's why things are going to shift under this Uranian influence, this Aquarian energy, because not just in tarot, but in relation to Uranus, that energy is like a lightning bolt, and it will create the catalyst that's needed to make the changes that are necessary, whether you or I like it or not, because I am under the same laws, universal laws that you and everybody else on this planet and in this Milky Way are, you know. So I'm a messenger. I'm one of many messengers about this. And one of the main takeaways of this particular part of the reading, card 3 dance celebration, isn't just about, man, the need for man to change, but the need for man to own up to his feminine side, to balance himself in the left brain and the right brain thinking. And once that alignment happens, more men will be able to connect with their heart and participate in this journey of life and love rather than become warmongers and merge man with machine. Now, I recorded something yesterday that I'm trying to get posted on Patreon, and you can look for it. So I'm going to leave this for now, but now you know why Spirit had me pull this out and talk about it. And by the way, to start balancing yourself, if you're a man, a hypermasculine man, and you're trying to shift your energy, there's no judgment here. This is, actually information to help you make that shift, because it's not easy because of the conditioning and the expectations. And I've seen them transpire in my own family, okay, where the men behave more dominant than they need to behave. But it's because they're feeling the pressure from certain macho, hyper masculine men who are trying to promulgate, quote unquote, the law, which is operating to the extreme and in very illegal ways. They aren't following the law. And I know that firsthand, okay? So, and I was seeing this shift and this change and not realizing what it was at the time when it first started. But then I started really suspecting even certain police officers, government officials that I was working around, and even attorney generals and governors. So, and in more than one state. And that is what I, correlate back to the RICO, the racketeering over state lines, which I've said is illegal. It's unconstitutional as well. So, what's happening here is not different, though, from what happened during Jesus' time. And when you remember when I started off this reading, I was talking about these ascension deck cards. Accelerate your journey to the light. And at the bottom of the deck was the gold ray of Christ. And I was talking about other ascended masters. So if you don't resonate with Christ and the suffering of Christ, and it's sometimes hard to, because there's been so much misinformation and manipulation from the Catholic Church, one of many churches that manipulates the representation of Christ, okay, of Jesus, okay. So surely you can at least see the light in the animals, right? Now those who I said are possessed, I've seen them talk about animals as having red eyes. Well, animals don't have, historically they don't have red eyes. Maybe a poisonous frog does, or, certain animals that have certain genetic traits. But for the most part, mammals, have a light in their eyes, and you can see them when you come upon them as you're driving past. You can see the light in their eyes. You can see the light in domestic animals' eyes too. So, what I'm getting at is those who have been mind controlled and otherwise poisoned from within by drinking the cup of poison, or taking the blue pill or the red pill. When you do that, when you follow other people instead of your own guidance system and using your third eye to do so, to commune with the higher power, then you are going to become corrupted from within, just like a computer program, because you are being programmed, essentially. And that's the MK Ultra, CIA centralized intelligence, quote unquote, that I diss, because it is evil, okay? And it's to take over people's families and their souls and their possessions. So I saw this before my own eyes, okay? But I didn't know what it all was, and I started making those connections by 2012, 13, 14, which Behold a Pale Horse clarified for me. The book Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. So I strongly suggest you read that book as well as Code Word Babylon. Trouble Inside the Vatican. But what I'm getting at is, animals are here to help us balance our energy and maintain a balance on our planet, right? So there were a number of cards that I talked about. Kuan Yin is a feminine master, ascended master, Asian, and she helps with your stellar gateway chakra and a connection to the Antakarana bridge to spirit, to source, okay? So it's building that electromagnetic field or bridge, like the rainbow, right? When souls pass on, including animals, they go over Rainbow Bridge. That is the bridge. That's the electromagnetic bridge. That is the same electromagnetic force that comprises your internal energetic spine, which are your chakras. Okay, so I'm doing my best to connect this in ways that people will see, but also know that Serapis Bey was another um, ascended master from Egyptian time, from Atlantis and Egyptian, uh, when Atlantis fell, right? And when Atlantis fell, the civilization of Atlantis was lost, or quote unquote fell. Um, their access, they fell because their access to the 12 chakras that they were able to utilize and to commune with the higher power were obstructed, essentially. And what is our technology doing? It's messing with our ability to commune with the higher powers, so this dark force can take over. That's why if you don't resonate with the gold ray of Christ or Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, then hey, there are other ascended masters that have walked this planet and have brought similar messages about love and compassion, right? Which are higher vibing energies. Get the book Power versus Force, The Hidden Determinants of Human Behavior, and you will see uh, scientifically how this is measured. And the author of that book, David R. Hawkins, wrote it having gone through his own dark night of the soul experiences. So, there are many great masters that have walked the earth, and this says they've had incarnations, mastered their lessons, which Saturn is involved with, the energy of Saturn, and they ascended, and that is what we're working on now with this civilization, so it does not fall and meet the same demise as other civilizations that, some people try to poo-poo and say never existed. Okay. But, so in order to walk with ascended masters, you have to elevate yourself. You have to go through the lessons. You have to master them. You have to, quote unquote, do the work. Okay? And that's part of my purpose in teaching. What I'm teaching is to help you see the magic on the earth and not to go along with the people who are part of the war mens rea mental state and war machine. And that was part of my mastery in my lesson. And I chose, to get the hell out of Dodge more than once, and in more than one location in the United States. So, you can bring wisdom from the hidden realms into your life by asking for intervention and praying. And so I'm going to get into some prayers here at the end, okay? And some other ways, logical ways of thinking about what work it is that you need to do and how you're going to do this to become more compassionate, understanding, and protective of life on the planet, of nature, right? Nature and nurture and animals. So you can state simple affirmations. I thank, bless, and love the entire nature kingdom, the animal kingdom, the plants, the plant kingdom. Here it talks about the 12 chakras. Following the fall of Atlantis, 5 of 12 chakras closed. Ascension starts when we once more activate our 12 fifth dimensional 5D chakras. And that's what I'm helping people realize. And that's part of my journey. I was intrinsically doing this. The more that protracted war escalated in my neck of the woods, in my life, beyond 1991, when I first heard a voice over the radio when I was at Andrews Air Force Base say something that disturbed me and had me concerned about my family's well-being. And it turns out that I was not wrong whatsoever. Okay, so you'll begin to reconnect to your 12 chakras and the 12 strands of DNA that aren't junk DNA, so you can reclaim your true spiritual and psychic gifts, so you'll be able to live beyond this 3D matrix, which to me is more, it feels more like 2D. The higher I evolve, the more difficult it is for me to deal with the energy. You know, I have compassion for people, but not those who are hurting animals and hurting our planet. Okay, so and in my travels in 3D and working, I came across this candle the other day. So I'm going to try to light it at the end of this reading, and it would be cause for celebration because I've graduated to this next level that I'm going into, as I've said, to help more people on the planet. And I'm excited about that, even as I continue to function in physical body and physical form on the 3D earth plane. Okay, so I've talked about this, I've talked about this. I don't want to get rid of the screen, but Robert Sepper, the anthropologist, is doing a lot of really cool research, and he's got a lot of interesting videos out. And one that I just took a screenshot of, not for plagiarizing, but to share, he's talking about the fourth root race of man. Okay, and he's talking about it in relation to hierophants. And so I'll try to post that picture on Patreon for the extended part 2 of this reading. Okay, but so you may wonder, where'd the word hierophant come from? And, you know, there's a steeped history of tarot. And, you know, I was learning tarot before I learned about the history behind tarot. But it turns out that I was around a lot of these people who know about tarot, and they're, in my estimation, are playing tarot games along with the war games, because when you connect the dots back to the triangle, right? I talk about the triad, but it's not a good triad. It's the Federal Reserve, which is the banksters or the banks that fund the war machine. And then it's over here, the war machine, right, that goes out and slaughters and steals people's possessions and gold, just like Hitler. You know, we know what he did, stealing artwork and other things, and stealing all the trinkets and gold and jewels and all that from the Jewish people, the real Jewish people. Essentially stealing their identity. So that's what I was dealing with out in California. It was like the Fourth Reich coming back to life. So I don't think that Hitler actually committed suicide back in the 30s, because Operation Paperclip and other secret things transpired, along with controlling Tesla technology to have a death ray machine, which is essentially what directed energy weaponry is. So no, I don't think that Hitler actually passed away in the 40s, 43 or 44, whenever that was. But anyway, nevertheless, the technology survived from World War II and World War I, because they were using mustard gas and other chemicals, you know, during World War II and beyond, to snuff out the desired enemy, that was being scapegoated essentially. So I was on the receiving end of that habituation by and beyond 9/11, 2001, as it turns out. But the third part of this triad or triangle of trauma, I call them triangles of trauma, um, is the church, the Catholic Church, okay, the Jesuits. And when you look at the history of the Jesuits, who are they? And what did they stop doing and start doing? They weren't protecting uh, the women and children, were they? But they did decide to rape, rob, and pillage. And they did start banks. The Knights Templar were bankers. They created the credit card system. And when you look at COVID and you look at the numerology of 19 and, correlate that back to the sun and Amun Ra and Egypt, you can start to see how things have been grossly manipulated after the fall of Atlantis. And there's so much confusion about what is up and what is down and what is good and what is not good. And they know the game and they know how to flip the game. They know how to manipulate the game. They're connected deep and steep in the manipulation of what is reality and what is this matrix. And they have control of a lot of the resources and the money. And they also know how, as I've learned, to manipulate housing, water resources, family law, the court system, the government system, the state government system, the earth system, etc. So you can see some of my posts on at Blue Crystal, including how to use artificial intelligence to track innocent people as they live their lives, including me. And so I learned all this by going through it, of course, right? But the Catholic Church has unclean hands, and we know that they do in many respects, not just about, dominating over religion and serving as middlemen that are supporting criminal activity under the guise of Jesus, under the guise of Christianity, but, also the pedophilia um, and the targeting of innocent children and women. And you can trace this back to what they did to women in biblical time, right? Um, Long ago, but also to scientists, like I mentioned, Galileo. And then going into other countries and basically their foot soldiers, whoever they are at the time, whatever they're called at the time, conquistadors, uh, crusades, um, Nazis, etc., are all, in my estimation, connected back through the Catholic Church control of Christianity, but also the goddess and also Mary Magdalene and other women of the Bible who were subjugated. And that's the problem of patriarchy. And so, was it interesting that, or was it coincidence that I was feeling that and sensing that as a young girl uh, after the Vietnam War era was dying down, was ending? And I was in middle school or junior high school by then, but I was getting, treated that way in my own community. And just down the road was a Mormon church. So, and then later, that kind of influence was around my neck of the woods when my house was being stolen. So that's why I'm saying these big churches and big corporations, they aren't about you really evolving your soul, but they sure as hell are about taking your money. They're middlemen, okay? They're the middlemen for the devil. They aren't the middlemen for God, most of them, because of the deadly sins that they've aligned with: greed or gluttony, avarice, pride, sloth, envy. Okay, and those are the kinds of energies that were also directed at me as a female with a womb, but also as a scientist, and a mother. But luckily, as a kid, I was in touch with nature. Okay, so I talked about the Two of Roses and the Three of Roses cards. These cards have been kind of hanging out around my desk lately, and it shows this progression, right? 2, 3, and 4. I mentioned the number 4 was a number that came out, or that was coming. It was being communicated to me when I was trying to heal from all the attacks that that I dealt with, which were directed at me both by people on foot, the foot soldiers in civilian clothes mainly, but also by lawyers, judges, cops, and others that were hired to ensure that that I couldn't live in my community or work in my profession anymore. So why is that? And why is it that over 100 scientists have been killed, and then in mysterious and really violent ways uh, that don't, they try to make it look like they did it to themselves, but there's just no way with some of the gruesome things that happened to them that they did it to themselves. And the same holds for a lot of veterans of past wars, okay, that are suffering. And this MK Ultra manipulation through the FBI and the CIA, stateside and internationally. So I'm here to continue speaking about this as I lift the veil on these evil plots and schemes to control more people on our planet and resources. And my background is natural resource management and environmental science, specifically involving water or hydrology, the hydrologic system, so I can address the problematic manipulation of the weather as well, from the skies above. And you'll see back here, I've got, along with the Veil of Illusion card, there's the air card that came out when I was shuffling. So I'll try to get into that. But I'm here as a scientist to lift the veil on this illusion, which is what the card number 1 or position number 1, fog veiled. There's many layers to this, many, many, many layers. But if you look up the dead scientist lists on the web, on the internet, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, and you'll be able to start making really important connection as to what areas of science have been hit hard, and also why I was too in the water industry in California. Okay, so I'm going to set these aside for now. This dance celebration card. I've got a little book here called Dream Catcher, a guide to dream interpretation, and we know that indigenous people make the wonderful dream catchers, right? Here's a pretty cool little book. This book is by I just found it in a little store that was having a sale one day. 2002. Donna Ingmason and Becky Terhune. Designed by Becky Terhune. And illustrations by Donna Ingmanson. Although you don't always realize it, you spend a portion of each night letting your unconscious spirit dance through your dreams, weaving elaborate scenes with shreds of your past, present, and imagined future. And we know John Lennon was singing about this, imagine all the people living life in peace. And so that's what many of us are hoping to achieve at this great shift or grand conjunction, which astrologically is more tightly aspected, I believe is the term to use, than it was back in 1962. So there is a greater chance that we will succeed. And that will be good not only for inhabitants of Earth, but inhabitants of those in the Milky Way system, right? And Archangel Sandalphon is reminding us how important this is in relation to planetary cycles and the order of the universe. Universal order, universal law, okay? I'll get to this card next because this is getting to the root of it. This is the red chakra, the root chakra, and you'll see why. I get to that in just a minute. So, this is the Dreamcatcher book, a guide to dream interpretation, as I said, and it's pretty cute. Pretty cute little books. I always liked getting these types of books when I was a kid, and one of them that I bought was about love. It was a little Hallmark book, and it was yellow. So you can see my desk covering here is yellow, and it correlates with this dance celebration card where she is just being who she was born to be, and her spirit is dancing. She's happy. She's in touch with the earth and her surroundings, her environment, and she is following her own stripes, right? She looks balanced and she looks happy and at one with her surroundings, her environment, and her culture. So the Earth Star Chakra is I have my own little cards. The Earth Star Chakra came out when I decided to shuffle just my little, set of chakra cards. So I brought this into the message for this dance celebration card, okay? Give a little bit more context in relation to the chakras, okay? And if you'd like some guidance, you can contact me at Science Spirituality Universe city.info, and I'd be glad to help you with a crystal reading or some chakra guidance. And usually I like to do them together, so you can contact me about pricing. Okay? So look up Robert Sepperer. He is an anthropologist, and he's talking about the hierophants of the fourth root race, or the fourth race of man. And in this deck by Diana Cooper, the Ascension deck, Accelerating Your Journey to the Light, she also talked about, I came across one of the cards that talked about the new man. Okay, so along with this new age and the new earth, there is also a new man that is being birthed, if you will, energetically. And this occurs as the seven veils of illusion are lifted. And this will help generations to come. Because when you get back to the root of it, what's plaguing a lot of us in our daily lives has everything to do with what still exists within our DNA and our root chakra. And this is where willpower to overcome those genetic predispositions, if you will, but they're spiritual dispositions. And they're, also obviously ancestral issues or even curses, I've learned. So it takes willpower, a lot of willpower to overcome. And that's why moving, through the chakras and clearing the chakras from red to yellow is critical so that you're able to improve upon your communication and direction, receiving the right direction, as opposed to the devilish directions that make people think that they're God, but they're actually operating out of their root and their sacral sexual chakras that are distorted, that have distorted their thinking. And what they think about does and is being projected onto others that are innocent and in harm's way, just as I experienced. And that is the war machine, essentially. So movement from red to orange to yellow, from the sacral up into the gaining more willpower, which can also be realized scientifically by reading Power versus Force. You will see at the lower levels and the lower energy realm are the lower vibing behaviors that feed the war machine. Anger, pride, sadness, even guilt. A lot of those lower energies are driving a lot of what's happening and being directed at the woman and the child. It's not about women and children first, and that's what I was getting at in relation to the Knights Templar. Something happened back, something not good happened back during the Crusades and all the way back through history, and a lot of it has to do with the manipulation of the Holy Bible, the information in the Bible, and of course, what happened when Jesus died. Jesus perished, and they took his message, but they twisted the message, the true meaning of Jesus' message, and also denigrated the feminine energy at that time. And we've been suffering since, under multiple patriarchal ways of control. So that's what my book was getting at, hindsight 2020. So the root issue, I'm going to read this card and some of the other angel cards because they're important to go through. But that's what I'm talking about here. You won't ascend if you get stuck in the karmic trench, which has everything to do with what's stuck in your root chakra that's been handed down. And many of us on this planet decided to evolve to correct these problems. So it's going to require peace and meditation and self-control and mental self-control, emotional, mental self-control. But also environmental justice, which is what I teach about as well. And that gets back to how the justice system in the United States and elsewhere are failing. Okay. So, I wanted to read this air card, okay? Because you'll see, again, I mentioned earlier on, you know, she's at one with her environment and she's inspired by what is around her in the air, on the ground. This is the environment. Her environment is supportive of her. She's happy. She's joyous. She's at one. Okay, atone at one. Atonement. She's at one with herself and her spirit and her surroundings. Those who are not happy and not at one with their spirit, with their soul and their heart and their mind are doing the opposite. And they're also attacking those around them who they don't resonate with, which you can see just from this illustration that I'm making in relation to this dance card. They don't want you happy. They don't want you dancing. The movie Footloose is a good example of that, back from the 80s, right? After the Vietnam War. And, you know, there's a lot of not good things going on where that was filmed, including, you know, the National Security Agency that has set up shop in Lehi, Utah. I grew up in Utah, so I've seen how Utah's changed a lot. And there's a lot of interstate, intrastate, and interstate manipulation occurring between California and Utah. So, you know, but God has had me here in the Western United States as a witness of all such things, because this is where a lot of the manipulation in the United States is occurring on the West Coast, not just in Washington, D.C., the city-state. So the air, you know, what's sounding in the air is problematic, right? And the song by Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight, I think some people can relate to that as well, right? The element of air supports truly magical cosmic qualities. Elementals working for the elemental masters are involved, including the unicorns. And I'd mentioned before, you know, children aren't perverted and they see the magic and they're in touch with the magical realm, including the angels, just like I was as a kid. And that's why nature was so important for me. And that gets back to this card here, right? So it's no surprise that I decided to become an environmental scientist through all the twists and turns. I didn't plan on it, but Spirit wanted me to take the course that I did, despite the military moves, despite the setbacks, despite health problems I had, including cancer, despite abuse, physical, emotional, etc. I still stayed the course and I still did what it was that I was supposed to do and become. Here this says, you're guided to ask the unicorns to spread the qualities of enlightenment, the qualities of air, enlightenment, ascension, enthusiasm, freedom, and divine vision. Okay? And it looks like she's doing this too, right? As she dances around in the air with her feet on the ground, grounding herself and grounding herself with the earth, right? And the earth, her earth star chakra. So earth and air. Okay. This says here, I invoke air to carry angels singing around the world and bring hope and peace. Okay. Also ask that the air is purified and that polluted areas may be cleansed. Because we know, and I know, that they are being purposely polluted with heavy metals to change the composition of the atmosphere to suit a few at the expense of the many on our planet. And our atmosphere was formed billions of years ago. So, what gives them the right to change the composition of our atmosphere and slaughter and kill people who've evolved to resonate with the air and the land and the water, with Gaia, with the spirit of our earth, this is our only home. Where will these people who are trying to change Earth go after they've effed up our planet? And we can't travel anywhere else, okay? So, this is really an important card, and it's important to understand what this celebration is about as the war machine ceases to exist, because we are learning so many things that we need to know at this point in time to ensure that we have no more war, despite what is happening right now in Ukraine. That's why I'm forecasting that despite the shit starters who want to keep people from dancing, including from Lehigh, Utah, and from the western U.S. involving Agenda 21, and from the White House in Washington, D.C., and Congress, and the judicial system, the executive, judicial, and legislative branches. There are checks and balances. And when those checks and balances are manipulated, universal law is kicking in to make sure that this happens. And this air energy is becoming predominant as the age of Aquarius uh, commences, right? Because Aquarius is air energy, and it's sudden shocks and changes. So get ready for more sudden shocks and changes, because this is exactly what is to transpire. And what will fall are the veils of illusion. Okay? And that's what I get at the beginning of this entire Earth is Magical message for card number 1. And card number fog veiled, and card number 2 is release. We're releasing the past. We're releasing all these illusions and keeping our hearts in check, right? And knowing that the energy of air and in the Aquarian age is significant, and that is what's going to happen in the age of Aquarius, which is exactly what this great shift is about, okay? And it's coming online hard and fast now since the December 2020 winter solstice. Okay, so I'll be reading this card, the High Lord of Gratitude and Service, because we're going to be utilizing the positive energy to ensure that service is seen differently than it has been, in the past. And this is about selflessness, not selfishness and hoarding resources and absolutum dominatum, dominating land and resources and people. This is also about having humility, as I spoke about in previous parts of this reading, being humble, learning to humble oneself, and taking conscious action, not operating from an unconscious, wild, extreme mental state. So I'm going to take a break and then I'll be back to talk about many of these Angels of Atlantis messages, specifically about having the willpower to overcome the deadly sins, right? And in doing so, we help save our earth, which is what my audio message gets at as well. And I'll try to load that.